Hey everyone, it's SJ and welcome back to Something Different Sunday. Today we are looking at MetaZoo, and as we open this first edition spellbook, we'll discuss why this game failed. If you're unaware of what MetaZoo was, it was a card game that had a very successful Kickstarter in 2020 and then had its official release in July 2021. Cryptid Nation was the first set that came out and was very successful at the beginning. This spellbook is essentially a booster bundle or elite trainer box, to use terms from Magic and Pokemon respectively, but it's just a starter box with 10 packs, equivalent of lands, and a rules book. I bought this for $90 when it came out, but at one point this was selling for $250. Now you can pick this up for $30. When MetaZoo released, people saw incredible financial success with cards, but that exponential growth and excitement was short-lived, with successive set releases starting to display signs of trouble. Booster boxes were in clearance sections at card shops, people weren't playing the game, and MetaZoo gambled big on a Hello Kitty branding set, which failed miserably. By January 2024, MetaZoo officially closed its doors and ceased all operations and future products. So let's talk about why this game failed. Now, this spellbook was an interesting product, and I'll go through all of the contents in this video. I will say this is a nice product with a map showing all of the cryptids and some other interesting things. However, I never really got into MetaZoo. This was the only thing I bought, and I didn't jump on the hype train, but that's because it just didn't resonate with me. However, I will keep my personal biases and negative comments out of this because there were people who did enjoy this game, and there was a lot of hard work that goes into building something. Lastly, all of these are just my opinions, so feel free to leave comments below if you agree or disagree. Now, the first and foremost reason this game failed is due to its unnatural growth in the beginning. Funny enough, there is a pretty synonymous case study behind this with a company you probably wouldn't expect. Maybe I'm dating myself, but does anyone remember Krispy Kreme in the early 2000s? Yep, that's right, the green and white donut shop with delicious little glazed donuts. Krispy Kreme had tremendous success after its IPO on April 5th, 2000, and saw rapid growth and expansion all across the United States. Its stock price eventually reached $50 a share, but by 2005 it ran into a ton of financial troubles. It expanded too much, oversaturated the market with its product by adding multiple stores in a small area, and producing prepackaged donuts found in stores and gas stations, which therefore devalued the novelty of a Krispy Kreme donut. They mismanaged and offended franchisees, and ultimately held on to the belief that the initial hype around their glazed donut experience would be enough to carry them into the future. MetaZoo is pretty similar. They had a ton of success with the first box, and printed more and more for upcoming products. This was predicated on the initial hype of the product, but hype is an ephemeral resource. Assuming your next product is going to be as successful or more successful is a dangerous strategy. This led to an overprinting of multiple sets, which did not sit well with the community. When you see a TCG product sitting on shelves at your local card shop, and eventually the clearance section, that is a stigma that is difficult to move past. The final nail in the coffin was in November 2023, where MetaZoo's Hello Kitty set was launched. Now, getting a partnership with one of the largest IPs in the world is impressive, but it doesn't mean it's going to sell well. They had a partnership with TCG Player as well, and had an overpriced kit for sale. Apparently they sold a fraction of the kits, and then TCG Player dumped all of the rest in a fire sale. This, on top of all the other partnerships with Walmart, Target, Topps, and various others, ended up being too much and too quick, while the demand did not live up to the supply that oversaturated the market. One quick aside, I think another smaller reason this game wasn't successful is because the cards just genuinely don't look that good. And I don't mean the art, but the actual physical cards. The color scheme is not pleasing to the eye. This is somewhat subjective, but also there's a reason why color theory exists. Using red as a border is an interesting choice, because red is a bold and loud color. Some cards have a red and yellow color scheme, which is really high contrast. This is typically for attracting attention, like a caution sign or in advertising. There's a very real reason you do not see this color scheme on a website when you're trying to read. This is a fatiguing color scheme, and not part of any monochromatic, analogous, or complementary color theory. I worked on quite a few design projects in my career, and I implore you to take an hour and study color theory if you plan on making something because it really does make a difference even if it isn't noticed consciously. Eye appeal is an important factor for cards, and sometimes being unique and different isn't a good thing. The next reason this game failed is simple, but just as important as number one, and that is there wasn't a real form of engagement with this product. This game was marketed as a collectible card game, but collectability is derived from engagement. People collect Pokemon because they know it and like it. They can play the TCG, but they can also engage the brand from TV shows, movies, video games, toys, plushies, and tons of other methods. They know the Pokemon, and even though they may not play the card game, they still collect the cards because it has meaning to them. On the other hand, Magic, in my opinion, has the best card game in the world, and is one of the most fun things you can play. My friends and I still talk about games that happened a decade ago because they were that fun, intense, and engaging. We engage the game through playing, through the community, but also things like lore, nostalgia, and just history of the game. Even things like Star Wars toys are collectible because people grew up on the movies and it has some sentimental value to them. MetaZoo didn't really have any of that. Since this game came out in 2020 through 2021, there wasn't a community or playgroup aspect of this since most game stores were still locked down. There wasn't any supporting media or digital client to play. The only way to engage with MetaZoo was to buy and sell the product, which is not conducive to long-term success. I personally didn't know any people or card shops in my area that played or had players, which is not a good sign because there are a lot of card shops in my area, and I know a fair amount of people who play a bunch of different TCGs. I know that's anecdotal, but any and all games will fail if people do not play it, and MetaZoo is no exception. Finally, the last reason this game failed is because it didn't really have its own identity. MetaZoo's art is reminiscent of early Pokemon. If I took one of these characters and put it next to the original Pokemon concept art, you see all the similarities. MetaZoo was looking for the nostalgia that watercolor Pokemon invoked, which is important to remember because this came out in 2020, which was the peak of the vintage Pokemon boom. In addition, what was the face of MetaZoo? Was it Mothman? Which cryptid was the Pikachu, the Blue Eyes White Dragon, or the Black Lotus of the game? What is the reason people want to get invested in this game? Outside of external events affecting gameplay, it didn't really have any unique gameplay. Ultimately, if a game doesn't have its own identity, then it gets assigned an identity by the community, and people started assigning a negative identity to MetaZoo. Now this is somewhat poetic. I just pulled what used to be the most valuable card in the set. This is a full hollow first edition Mothman. A few years ago this would have been hundreds of dollars, but now it sells for $15. It's still a nice looking card though, and I'll sleeve it up out of respect for it. This is a good reminder that many TCGs end up failing, but very few of them have the initial success and story of MetaZoo. It was a game that was pretty polarizing, but it had a huge amount of support from various YouTube channels and even celebrities like Steve Aoki. It had the air of success but lacked the fundamentals to keep it successful. Nothing was normal about MetaZoo, and opening up Mothman that used to sell for over $1,000 as a PSA 10 is now worth only about $15 3 years later is proof of MetaZoo's short but volatile history. You never like to see a card game fail, but in all honesty, I am not surprised this game didn't survive long after 2020. There were likely other reasons that this game failed, like general mismanagement of the product, but since I don't have any knowledge of the inner workings of the business, I can only base that on external observations, which is not enough evidence to make this a conclusive reason. Whether you loved or hated MetaZoo, this is a good case study for future TCGs to learn from. Nothing will ever be collectible because you say it is, but instead people collect things as a form of engagement. Whether it's sentimental value, actual value, owning a piece of history, or any other reason people collect things, a card game needs engagement to survive. I hope you enjoyed this Something Different Sunday, and please let me know your thoughts on this video. Please like and subscribe as it really does help, and I truly appreciate the support. As always, thank you for watching.